Hey, good morning, good evening, and good night. Just in case I don't see you. Welcome to Historiando, where we aim to study or investigate the history of Puerto Rico one day at a time. I am Dr. Edwin Jusino Aldarondo. I am an American history doctor, PhD, and this recently came up to my radar. There's a show by John Leguizamo, who's a Puerto Rican. Where he goes visits different places in the United States, and he actually did one on Puerto Rico. So I'm not gonna be reacting to his entire episode. I'm gonna be reacting to the trailer to his episode, which was debuted, I think, a month ago, more or less. And later on, if people are interested, I will do a reaction to his entire video. But I did one simple look before actually deciding to come into the studio to record. So I am still raw with certain criticisms to Mr. Leguizamo. But let's start, huh? Let's start and see where this goes.
The Puerto Rican personality is strong and it's positive and it believes in itself. I'm John Leguizamo, and this is a first look at Leguizamo Does America. It's so important to put a spotlight on Puerto Rico because Puerto Rico is part of the U.S. Whether it's a commonwealth and it doesn't have statehood, it still is part of the United States. And it needs to be thought of that way, and it needs to be respected. And that's what I had to go there, because even though there's 3 points.
Okay, so this is interesting. I like that he's not going on full on with, Puerto Rico needs to be an independent country, or let his politics get mixed up. So at least we're seeing a bit of restraint from him. I if I'm not mistaken, John Leguizamo is a nationalist. So it just strikes me that he mentions statehood. They usually try to not associate Puerto Rico with statehood when they're speaking or in public areas, or at least in public forums. That might be the better explanation. So up to now, an A solid.
0.5 million Puerto Ricans on the island. They have contributed so much to American culture in terms of music. Salsa was invented by Puerto Ricans. Reggaeton was invented by...
Sorry, I got to stop you there, John. We did not invent salsa. That was the Cubans, man. Just saying. It was created in Cuba. I mean, we have great salsa artists, which you're going to go in and mention, if I'm not mistaken, J-Lo, and you're going to mention Mark Anthony. They do some salsa, they do some merengue, but salsa was not invented in Puerto Rico. It was invented in Cuba. So, strike one for Mr. Leguizamo.
By Puerto Ricans. They gave us J-Lo, they gave us Mark Anthony. They have contributed so much. We got Sonia Sotomayor in the Supreme Court.
Okay, I want to say something. We may not have salsa, but at least we have Mark Anthony's portrayal of Preciosa. Oh God, if you haven't listened to Mark Anthony singing the song Preciosa, you should. That's an awesome rendition of that song. It's a very patriotic song, and I recommend it to anybody to listen to it if you want to really understand the Puerto Rican soul and the Puerto Rican perspective from the 20th century.
For a small island, their contributions are enormous.
Yeah, I mean, 3.2 million
I'm
there,
heading to
John.
the center of the
3.2.
island to one of the most important pre-Columbian archaeological sites in the world, the Caguana Ceremonial Grounds.
And this is
A
where we're
sacred
going to start
place for the
seeing
Taino
the
people who
problems.
thrived here until the 15th century, before colonizers like Columbus arrived on the island and changed the course.
Okay, first of all, and I'm not gonna hold it up to you, John. Really, I'm not gonna hold this to you because this is something I, as a historian, recently learned, and when I mean recently is in like in a few years. So, I'm not gonna hold it against you. So, if you're watching this video, I have nothing but respect right now for you, and it has nothing to do with it. The name Taino is not the name for our native Caribbeans. You can, if you're interested, you can go to my Patreon and watch the explanation of how that name was, of how the real name was discovered. But the name is Ejeri, so can we stop calling them Taino? Actually, if you ever hear anybody say, "Well, my my ancestors are Taino," just they're lying. They're ignorant and they don't know what they're talking about. Because if they're real, if what you're going into, if these people were real Tainos or real Ejeri, they wouldn't call themselves Tainos.
Course of history. Some archaeologists argue that the Taino bloodline no longer exists. I believe that too. And
No, that's false. What archaeologists have said over and over again, because there's a difference between blood and genetics and culture. What archaeologists and historians like myself argue correctly, I may say, is that the culture that was the Ejeri or the Arawaks that were in Puerto Rico and in the entire Caribbean, or the rest of the northern Caribbean, because I'm not gonna go into the Califunas, which is basically the Caribs. They're still around, by the way. They're still around as a culture, as a society. So I'm not including the Califunas, who are Arawaks, by the way. So we're gonna talk about quote unquote Tainos disappearing. Yes, the culture that we call Taino or Ejeri did disappear by the by the 1700s. Why? Well, there's different reasons. The main one was an epidemic of smallpox that spread like wildfire through their yucayecas, because these natives, they had no resistance to these diseases. And by the way, these diseases were brought over by African slaves, not by the Spanish directly. It was indirectly brought over. This epidemic, or the smallpox, comes in the first boat of African slaves, which is around 1503, if I'm not mistaken. And what happens is that it starts spreading through these native communities. Spanish and obviously Africans have, for thousands of years, have had contacts. So these diseases have already built up immunity in their cultures and in their systems. But for obvious reasons, it was the American natives had very little contact with non-American natives in thousands of years, because they were cut off when the Bering Strait disappeared. And of course, in the few different expeditions that came from China and that came from Scandinavia, these diseases were not brought over. They were brought over when actual efforts of colonization started in full. And it was unfortunate. It was a mistake. They didn't understand germ warfare or germ theory. I'm sorry, not warfare. Germ theory as we understand it now in the 20th and the 21st century. Anyways, what were you saying, Leguizamo?
Even mentioned it in my show, Latin History for Morons. But here's the thing.
Hola, qué
Which-
placer, ¿cómo está?
Hola.
After my show, I got a letter from a woman who said, hold on a minute. She's Taino and very much alive.
No, she's
So-
not. These people are actually Neo-Tainos. They are people that claim to have native ancestry. They may very well be native, may very well have native ancestry. Most Puerto Ricans have around 15 to 25% of what is called Taino DNA. But again, there's a difference between having ancestors that were natives and actual Caribbean or actual culture. There's a difference. There's a big difference. First of all, if these people were doing a correct or a real ceremony, they would be all naked. Just, yeah. Because Tainos didn't wear clothes. So, and I'm being over generalizing here. They did wear like a loincloth or something for the women. But the men were completely naked. So,
I met with some members of her tribe to educate myself. Surrounded by their ancestors.
and another thing, they called tribe. Why would they call themselves a tribe? The real word would be yucayeke. The word, the that is the word of the communities that the natives would participate in. And I'm sorry, but these people are not. They're not natives. Just gonna flat out say it that way.
This
They're not
traditional
natives.
ceremony is meant to bond our relationship as friends by making me a part of the community, an extended family member.
Can somebody
The
please
White
tell me
Yao or
where
oath
they
exchange began.
get what primary source talks about this? I'm not being facetious here. I want to know what primary source actually explains this type of ceremony, which is probably invented. If I'm not mistaken, most ceremonies, most white yaos, were done with, they would smoke tobacco and with some spices and herbs that would act like cannabis, and well, actually they would act more like magic mushrooms. And what was the name? I'm just gonna call it the sacerdote, the priest of the community. They would go in a trance and they would see and they would have these different visions, and they would come back. There's also the ball game where they would test out the gods by a simple yes or they would make a question that would be answered in a yes or no in a yes or no manner, and whomever dropped the ball first, the team that dropped the ball first, that would be the answer for the yucayeke. So this is infuriating because this isn't actual native Caribbean or Yeti ceremonies. These are ceremonies that have been invented by Neo-Tainos for argument's sake, and that is cultural appropriation.
And I felt instantly transported.
You felt
With each gust
instantly
of cleansing
transported.
smoke, I felt a deeper connection to this place and its people.
Going to Caguana was so.
I want to go back. Hold on. Like I said, Sorry, I gotta go back. Let me check this out.
To this place and its
When I said that most, that our native Caribbeans that are Ejeris would be in their daily naked ways, why is she wearing this? I mean, uh, it's like this isn't really Ejeri done. This is probably American Indians or something. This isn't used by Ejeri. This was never used by Ejeris at all. Like I said, it was a small loincloth, not this whole big thing in front. It'd be more akin to what she's wearing, which is really jeans. And I understand they wouldn't be able to do like a real life ceremony, naked ceremony, because of prudence and all these things and prude laws. But I mean, the guys, the, I just can't. I'm sorry, but this is not even. This isn't real. This is like, I've never seen this before. And anyways, let's just continue, because this is interesting.
People.
Going to Caguana was so miraculous for me because I'm 26% indigenous.
You're 26%
the
indigenous. Wow.
connection to the Tainos.
You felt the
I felt
connection
my
to
roots there.
okay.
I was very moved. I wept off camera after being with them, and I was very touched and moved by them. And to see that they're still thriving.
Hey, John, you were born in New York, man. That doesn't lessen the whole point that you are Puerto Rican, but you have no cultural attachment to Puerto Rican natives. Like I said, just because you have X amount of DNA that comes from Ejeris, because of course, once these Yucayecas would disappear, and after conquests and all these other things, whether forced or unforced, women did lay with Spanish men, because they were the following their tradition of going for the strongest man available. They bore sons and daughters, and that DNA follows us to today, because in the early years of the conquest of the Caribbean, women weren't brought. So men and women are the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and we have a biological need to procreate.
It was a very powerful moment. And yeah, I've had visions. I've seen my ancestors. I mean, as a
You've
girl, I
seen
did
your
Finding
ancestors.
My Roots on
Wow.
PBS, and I'm the only person that they've ever had whose family line goes back 500 years in the Americas on both sides.
Really? Oh, that's interesting. I mean, the majority of that family ancestry is actually Spanish. Like, just because you have a few, you may have like I don't know, great grandmother that is Ejeri. That again, that doesn't make you a native. And like I'm not trying to diminish your ancestry, but I'm just saying most of what you're going to find is either Spanish or mestizo in that line and in that ancestry. So you're Puerto Rican, man. You're not Ejeri. And this thing about wanting to be Ejeri is like, no, the Ejeri culture is dead. It became and it transformed with the intermingling of Spanish and African and now American cultures into what Puerto Ricans are today. And I'm sorry, but that's just the truth.
So I'm deeply rooted in the Americas.
Outside the fortress walls of El Viejo San Juan, you'll find the colorful and very private community of La Perla.
It's funny. Just saying. Aside from La Perla also serving as being very famous because of Despacito, um, the community is a very closed community for reasons, and I'm trying to be nice about. But they have to do with illegal activity that runs through that community, and it's not just La Perla; it's also other communities in Puerto Rico, and it's not as strange when you consider that the United States these things also happen when there's poverty. In impoverished areas, you're gonna have more um, more areas that are going to be downtrodden, and there's going to be crime. And there's a reason why they are that that closed off to the rest of the society. That's all I'm going to say.
The settlement was created in the 18th century when the Spanish ruled Puerto Rico and forced enslaved Africans and non-white servants to live apart from the rest of the community.
This, I don't know how real this is, particularly because in Spanish Caribbean culture or colonialism, at least like I said, exclusively in the Caribbean islands, particularly in Cuba and particularly in Puerto Rico, you would have whites, you would have Eyeris, you would have freed mulattoes, all living nearby one another in the same street. So this, I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying I wish he would cite his sources so that at least we can know where this is coming from. I don't doubt. I don't want to doubt it. Maybe this is happening when he's saying, because this is, after all, if he's saying late or after the mid 1800s, all Africans or people from African descent in Puerto Rico, they were freed. So maybe this is one of those communities that is established from uno de estos arrabales que he creado, from all these people that start moving from the countryside to the cities, looking for jobs and looking for all these things. And back then, Old San Juan was completely closed off with walls. I don't know where they get this. That is. I'd love to know where he gets that. I had never heard that little bit of information. So if anybody has any link in the comments where you can help me out with that'd be great.
It was a rough existence.
Funny enough, they're using in this video drawings from the countryside, which has nothing to do with La Perla, but they're talking about La Perla. Okay.
But the people had a secret that allowed them to express themselves, communicate, and preserve their culture.
See, this is where they lose, where they just completely fumbled. He's gonna start talking about the drums, and yes, African slaves would create la bomba puertorriqueña as a means of not only as a means of expressing their culture and keeping their culture alive, while in bondage, but also of communicating from one hacienda to the other. What I don't understand is why I don't think this is like Isamo. I think this is more about, a historian or somebody, a writer had to write this. Why are they? Yeah, why are they using La Perla as a way of presenting us this information? Because yeah, La Perla is or was created as as this new thing outside of the walls of San Juan in the 1800s, per their own information. But drums and the playing of drums goes back farther. It goes back to 1600s, 1700s. So this is where this kind of infuriating, because I get that they're trying to do a good thing. I get that they're trying to portray and show Puerto Rican culture and history to a broader audience. But if you're gonna do it right. Our history is rich with a lot of important events. Me, the way that I would have done this, if I were a writer and I would have been consulted on this, I wouldn't have said, listen, don't go to La Perla for that. If you want to do La Perla, okay, well, let's talk about, I don't know, Puerto Rican theater, where there's a great play by a Puerto Rican author that talks about life in La Perla and how these Jibaros, they came to San Juan and they would live in La Perla, and then afterwards they went to New York. But this is late 20th century. I'm sorry, mid 20th century. If you want to talk about drums, you could have gone to like an hacienda. You could have shown the different the ways or the areas where enslaved Afro-Caribbeans would actually live. You could have talked about the different slave revolts that happened in Puerto Rico, and use that as a way, as a jump off place. You already talked about Eyeri. You want to talk about the Afro-Caribbeans? Fine, let's talk about Afro-Caribbeans. Why not go to Loíza? See, that would have been a better way. You could have gone to Loíza, which is a more a community that was founded on Afro-Caribbean roots. You could have gone to Santurce, which is Cangrejos, where again, these communities, they were created from Afro-Caribbeans, both enslaved and non-enslaved. And there you could have talked about drums and Bomba, where these are the places where Bomba was actually developed, or at least closer to the San Juan, to the capital. But then you choose to go to La Perla. That makes absolutely no sense. Just plain and simple. Doesn't make sense. By the way, the drummer is really good.
Bomba.
It was gag laws.
It is.
Implemented like in the...
So we're going from La Perla to talk about drum to Bomba, and then we bring in the gag laws from the mid 20th century, which had nothing to do with culture, by the way. It had to do with political speech and people wanting to those that would advocate for independence and violence, in a particularly in a violent way, like the Nationalist Party was doing, which that was the aim to. They were targeting nationalists. Why are you talking about gag laws, man? And yeah, it gag laws The gag laws had nothing to do with Puerto Rican culture. And another thing, the people that created the gag laws were Puerto Ricans. They weren't Americans. It was just for reference sake. It was Luis Muñoz Marin, the second Puerto Rican governor of Puerto Rico. So the first one to be elected, but the second Puerto Rican to hold the office.
The 50s.
In the 50s, 1950s,
Yeah,
that late.
not that long ago.
Yeah.
Police
Used to
would
break it
come,
up.
arrest people. You know, it wasn't permitted. Bomba represents that resistance.
Again, like I said, the gag laws had nothing to do with Bomba or people playing Bomba. What would happen was that somebody that was involved in the nationalist movement and was using probably this cultural activities to spread nationalist fervor and spread independence messages and organize, and those would be the things that they would be after, not the bomba, not the actual playing of the drums, but the people and the things that would be happening behind it. Now, I'm not saying that the gag laws were constitutional. I'm not saying that they were right. What I'm saying is that it's being presented in a very wrong way, at least by this documentary standard. You know, if we're gonna talk about the gag laws, let's talk about the gag laws. Let's actually talk about what was in the laws per se, and stop this nonsense of using just the gag laws as this boogeyman of everything against Puerto Ricans, when again El Estado Libre Asociado was founded in 1952 and the gag laws start more or less around 1953. Just saying. So it was the civilian Puerto Rican elected government from El Partido Popular that created the gag laws. It wasn't the Americans.
To oppression by governments or other countries as well.
To learn everything about Bomba was incredible for me because I've heard it throughout.
By the way, Leguizamo, Bomba is the actual music that was created and invented in Puerto Rico, not salsa.
My life in New York City, in the streets, in the parks, and I've always loved the music and the dance, but I didn't know the history of it. That Bomba was used to communicate when there was slavery in the 1600s, and how
Thank
they
you
were able to communicate by
for fixing
certain
it.
drums and be able
1600s.
to
Thank
tell
you.
also what was the news of the time, who had escaped. It's an incredible lesson of how people survive any kind of oppression.
That is,
and can survive oppression.
like I said, that's all correct. That
Heading
piece
east
of
from
information. is
Ponce
correct.
to a town called Juncos, a farming community known for its fertile soil and natural beauty. It's in the foothills of this region that you'll find a restaurant called Bacoa. And yo, let me tell you, this is not just any restaurant. Thanks to Chef Raul Correa, Rene Marichal, and Xavier Pacheco, it's widely considered one of the best
Ribs.
restaurants in the world.
Purple.
I've been hearing about Bacoa for
I'm looking
a
at
long
that. I'm like,
time,
I want to go.
and getting
I'm
an
hungry. I
invite
wanna
to
go
mess
there.
around
I
in
wanna-
their kitchen
I wanna go
is
eat.
something I do not take lightly. Though I played a chef
I think
in
I'm
a
gonna
movie
go.
once,
I think
let
I'm
me
gonna make
tell
a
you,
video on
I
Bacoa.
am
I think I'm
no
gonna
chef
actually
in
go
real
and
life,
try and
but I'm always down
and do a
for
video on
challenge.
The
Bacoa.
dish that we're gonna do today is called funche. Funche, yes. This dish is a very humble dish. Also comes from our African heritage.
Right.
My father used to tell me it was a dish when didn't have no money.
Survival food.
Survival food. We're very grateful and humble.
Thank you for being here.
Having you here.
No, thank you for having us, man.
Bendiciones.
You know what's funny? First of all, I never heard the word funche, but that's fine because certain areas in Puerto Rico, they have different names for different things. And I was actually talking about this with a friend. In Ponce, they call the 5 cents ficha, and in Puerto Rico, and then like in San Juan, we call it something else. I'm thinking in English and Spanish. It's sometimes I forget the words, so I'm sorry about that. But Funche could be something else. I may know it. But what is funny is that these foods that were for the poor are now they're probably selling these at the restaurant for like very expensive. That in that in that in that feast alone, I can sort of see like $150 of worth of food just between the three of them. And the the drinks are are the more expensive things, but I think arroz con habichuelas and more or less like each plate is like around 10.50, $12. So plus taxes plus everything, it can go between 100 and 150 bucks. And and also depends on the restaurant. In this case, that restaurant is a very from what I could see is a very 5-star restaurant. So they could have it a little bit like more expensive.
Hermano.
Your generosity, your friendship is beautiful, man. I feel it.
Thank you, hermano.
Gracias.
Here I was in Bacoa, right outside of San Juan, with some of the best chefs in the world. All the food is sustainable, farm to table. It was amazing. I mean, the flavors were so powerful. I thought they were going to let me cook with them, but they kept interrupting and pushing me out of the kitchen. I guess they didn't want me to ruin their masterpiece.
Of course not.
Thanks
Who
a
would?
lot, fellas, for letting me participate. Not.
Ooh,
What it took away from Puerto Rico
somebody's
was how lovely the
mad.
people are. I mean, I think it's some of the friendliest, warmest people that I've ever met in the world.
Thank
And
you.
generous and unstoppable.
That is true.
Which is really what you walk away from the island. Look how they thrive against all odds. Conquest, U.S. invasion, U.S. not letting them be a state or a country and keeping them in limbo, and yet they still thrive. They still celebrate culture, and they still create their own culture and identity.
Hey, thanks for watching.
Well, that was it. That's it for this this episode of Historian Reacts. If you have anything, if you want me to react to anything, any clips, any videos, just leave it in the comments. I'm gonna be trying to do all these reactions in English for the foreseeable future, because I want to be able to reach my friends out there that are English speakers and start explaining and teaching what Puerto Rican history and culture is and what is not. So, anyways, just leave your comments, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and we have a Patreon where we're gonna be doing we're releasing our Spanish language podcast days and probably weeks in advance, and we also have an English language lessons. We're calling them lessons, where we go through. Where we're gonna be going through all of the history of Puerto Rico by time and by region, and we're also gonna be publishing English language essays and all these interesting resources, so that if you want to use them in your own classrooms back in the States, you can use them. Thank you all for watching, and see you in the flip side. Be peace.